Welcome to Council Fire with the RiverWinds. Your hosts, Chief Joseph and Dr. Laurelyn Riverwind, bring a First Nations perspective to scriptural studies, herbal medicine, current events, survival skill tips, and more. So, let's dive in.
Sorry.
Do-over.
Wow. I think I'm just going to leave that in there.
Maybe we should just say, okay, guys, we thought we were recording for a few minutes now.
And we were just going on and on and
Had this
on about how
wonderful
wonderful elder and
introduction.
introduction. And
Now we're starting over.
okay, so
Because
here
it
we
didn't
go.
record. I'm looking at our technical man.
I'm looking at, there's no one around
Squirrel.
to look at. Taigwe, everybody. Welcome to Council Fire with the RiverWinds.
Geo, y'all. It's good to be here. And we have a special treat for you today.
Yes.
As we were telling you guys, we thought, but apparently it was no one.
We were telling the creator.
So that was practice run.
Yes.
And now's the real thing.
We have just a wonderful treat for you today. You know, it's always a blessing to have the wisdom of the elders and their stories and their knowledge and their experience with us. And the creator told us that he was going to put the microphone to the indigenous voice, to the native voice. And he's done that with us. And we want to use that microphone to help edify and encourage and to bring these stories, bring this wisdom, bring these beautiful teachings of these elders to you, to all the indigenous people and non-indigenous people, because it is every tribe and every tongue.
And he has given other indigenous people microphones as well. And what we desire to do is just to help those overlap, because those are the stitches that unite us together as one blanket. And so for those of you who have not had the privilege of meeting this wonderful woman of Yahweh before, you are going to get to now. All of us have special people in our lives. Some of us have family members, and we have friends, but then there are those special people who are this unique, feels like an overlap or some type of category that's just miles and miles beyond what is truly important in our life.
And I truly believe that Dr. Quamanique and her husband Suuqiina, in being some of the original fire starters, you know, of bringing the fire of ancient knowledge and spiritual knowledge, long before many of us, you know, even started to begin to understand what the Hebraic understanding of our faith is and what these things mean to us as indigenous people. And they have been doing this long before many have ever known. Even when talk of the sleeping giant as First Nations people was just whispers, which is happening now all across. There's Native ministers and ministries out there and leaders and musicians that are doing incredible and powerful things. And we're able to highlight today Dr. Quamanique. And when we met her, we had gone to a Native conference, a Native hosted conference, and in Tennessee. And we went there. And there's a real funny story behind that. We won't get into it. We won't have time for that. We want to honor our guest time. And at that conference, we were there and somebody said, hey, you need to go check out these elders who are teaching in this classroom over here.
And we did. And our life has never been the same.
Never been the same.
And what's been interesting to us is that we have a certain thing that the Father has put for us to do, a certain office and calling. And what's really interesting is to meet the generation before you, your predecessors who had that same calling. And the similarities have been uncanny. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Quaminique?
I would absolutely say yes.
Everybody meet Dr. Quamanique, dear elder and spiritual leader of our people.
Dr. Quamanique Suuqiina of Indigenous Messengers International.
Yes.
Now, I would like to read from her bio for you. She was born in Charleston, West Virginia. She's of Native American, Scottish, Irish, English, and Jewish, Eastern European descent. So, like us, she is a mixed one, a blended one, blessed blend. She has always loved music and the arts and dance and people and animals and books. And she has been really instrumental in teaching people how to incorporate the arts as an expression of worship and also as a healing method. She has been amazing in the way that she has honored and loved Israel and the Jewish people. She has been a connector of people across miles and cultures. She's been in a ministry of reconciliation for many years. And she's helped many people overcome addictions and codependencies. She has personally, in my life, been somebody who's helped me navigate through traumas and dramas. And
she
and
just
done so
recently
well.
graduated.
Yes, she's recently gotten her doctorate. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Many years she has worked with her husband, Dr. Suuqiina, and has done so well with working with Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people worldwide. They have really been an instrumental part of helping people see the light of Yeshua. She has been she has a very difficult autoimmune disorder that she has beautifully navigated with such grace and elegance. And even right now, she's been just now coming out of being in a bedridden rest state because of a life-threatening occurrence that occurred with her health. And so, she's just dove straight head back into life and said, yeah, I'll do the interview. But we wanted to introduce to you Dr. Quamanique Suuqiina.
I am so honored to be here with you guys. I just wish it was in person so I could hug you.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
That would
Soon.
be awesome.
Soon.
Soon.
Well, we wanted to, first of all, tell you how much you and Suuqiina have meant to Joseph and I. And that's the reason why we asked you. We have saved the
first
what we
fruit
feel
slot.
like is, the honor of first fruit slot of our interviews in this podcast so that we could interview you first. And you have been such an amazing person in our life and in our work that we do for Creator. And we just wanted to honor you and say thank you for all that we have learned from you.
And as you know, traditionally, when introducing an elder, sometimes the introductions can go for an hour or so.
We could go on
and
and
we
on.
could go on and on.
We could talk about how she's sung in the Grand Ole Opry, how she was on the youth staff with Barbara Mandel's kids and the Oak Ridge.
I used to ride a Harley.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That she is like a woman after my own heart. And and by the way, everybody needs to know that her Johnny Cash's granddaughter dated her son. Hello. Talk about Nashville high society right here on Council Fire with the RiverWinds. Yeah, Men in Black.
So, Dr. Kwaminique, thank you for being here. And we'd love for you just to share what's on your heart and what is your calling right now in this season. What are you hearing Creator speak to you? Just share with our listeners whatever the Creator has placed upon your heart. We are honored to listen.
Well, I've been working predominantly with First Nations for the last over 2 decades, my husband and I. And when we came together, my main calling was to walk with women. I worked a lot with women who've been through domestic violence and spiritual abuse and sexual abuse, and an extreme calling for women, for the woman's voice to be brought back and be heard. And also Israel. I worked for a Messianic ministry for around 9 years. as one of their North America representatives. And when I first went to Israel, I was so ill and I did not want to go to Israel. I mean, I thought that, that Jesus was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant republic.
Well, of course he is, Quaminique.
And so
What-
I had
what
no
else would he
idea
be?
that he was a Jew. I mean, I read in the Bible, but I
What?
just absolutely. And
How
when
bizarre.
when the Lord called me to go to Israel, I was like, oh gosh, I'm so sick. I couldn't even have the stamina to do that. I don't want to go to Israel. And how the Lord got me there is he said, well, you don't have to go. I'll still love you and I'll still bless you. But we're getting married and I'd like you to meet my people. And I
Oh,
was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, how could I not go? So anyway, I was like, I have to go, and one of my friends made a veil for me. And when we landed in Israel, I put that veil on, and the Jewish people on the plane said, are you getting married in Israel? And I said, I am absolutely going to get married in Israel. It's an arranged marriage. My father arranged the marriage. I've been reading all about my husband to be and his family for years.
wow.
And I got off that plane with a veil on my head. And my life has never been the same. That was in 1997. And when I came back, I actually came back wearing an Israeli army uniform. One of the commanders over there gave me his stuff. And
Wow.
I came back wearing boots on the ground. And I brought back shofars and gosh, scarves and tallits. And I came back to Nashville and I went and I brought back, I had some juice from there and I brought some bread back from there. And I went around and did communion with all my friends and brought them things back. And it was just so profound. My life has never been the same, ever been the same since I've been grafted into the olive tree. I used to think that everything revolved around the church and love the church, but everything revolves around Israel. It was a big shift for me. I had to understand that all the planets go around the sun and Israel is like the sun. And being grafted in and understand there was only one tree. There was not another tree, and it's the olive tree. And those scriptures coming alive to me of understanding how it says the Jews' eyes were blinded. And so I understanding that I don't have any desire, really to proselytize Jewish people. I mean, it's been in the plan of Yahweh. They are his people, they're looking toward Messiah. I'm looking toward Messiah. I just happen to know who that Messiah is. So it really profoundly changed my life. And so now, all these years later, along with the RiverWinds, who are also called Israel, my calling right now is that I'm predominantly hosting gatherings between First Nations people and the Jewish people to honor Israel and to welcome them to our land. I mean, we understand that back during the World War, that the ship St. Louis came to with Jews loaded down during the Holocaust, and we didn't let them in. And as First Nations people, even though we've lost our land, most of it, not all of it, but we never lost our spiritual authority on the land. So Grand Chief Linda Prince stood before the Knesset in Israel and repented for that. Even though our people had lost the authority to do a lot of stuff, our people, First Nations people, we still carry that responsibility, that spiritual responsibility. And I also realized that, Israel is here. Yes, we need to go to Israel. We continue to go to Israel, but Israel is here. We have millions of Jewish people that even are here from Israel that have joint citizenship, thousands. And it's important for us as First Nations to stand with them, especially with anti-Semitism on the rise, to stand with them and welcome them and open that blessing of being welcomed on the land. So predominantly, that's what I'm doing right now.
And one thing I've learned from you is to stand with them without any expectation from them on their part.
Absolutely.
Like they don't have to believe the same way that we do, and they don't have to entertain hearing about what we believe. And we don't need to push that on them, but just to do what scripture says, to bless them and not just in the words and the act of saying, I bless you, because we know there's going to be some type of blessing that comes to us from it, but to just truly be a blessing by being a friend to them when they need it. And you've taught me to love them exactly where they are without expecting movement in any way that we think we should move them. And something that I feel the Lord has revealed to me through the way that you speak about them is that if the Lord says that he has intentionally placed cataracts on somebody's eyes, we are not cataract surgeons.
Mhm.
And when the time comes, just like Shaul, just like Paul, those scales will fall off of their eyes.
Right. And the second largest population of Jewish people is in the United States. And we have watched you do incredible things, and we have done things with you. And like, for example, one of the outreaches and working with Indigenous Bridges, which is an organization out of Israel, made the Jerusalem Post. And the shock and the awe of hearing the Jewish people say, wow, this reception, this welcoming, it touches their hearts. And of course, we love them because there are people, we understand what it means when somebody makes a blood covenant and gives their life for you. Well, you as Native people, we then have a life covenant to that person and their family. And so we love without expectation the people of Israel.
And that outreach that you were talking about, that was something that
Them.
Dr. Quamanique put together herself.
Yeah,
By reaching out to
the consulate.
the consulate in LA. And so just reaching out to the local synagogues and saying, how can we stand with Israel? How can we be a part of it? That's been a really big blessing in our lives, to be able to love on the Jewish people. Amidst the trauma that they're experiencing right now, there's enormous amounts of anti-Semitism in the world today, isn't there?
Absolutely. And the thing is that we have so much in common. We both believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we need to start in those places where we have agreement and respect one another. And I can tell you, when I hang out with the Jewish people, it opens the scriptures to me in ways. It's not like they need me. It talks about the Gentiles laying hold of one Jew and saying, show us to the Father.
Mm-hmm.
We need them so greatly, because they brought us the Torah. They brought us the words, the holy words, and they paid the price for that. One of the things that Jewish people normally say is, how are you doing? If I say, how are you doing? They'll say, we're trying to live through the blessing. It's like,
Wow.
and when we would pray with them, the prayer was, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. It's like there's so many likenesses to First Nations, but there's just so many likenesses to the human family. And one of the things that I feel strongly is that I feel like that our faith-based message should be a message of attraction instead of promotion. I feel like if you're living the message, and it's so much a part of you, it talks about the scriptures where someone came up to Paul and said, what must I do to be saved? I mean, I just think even when we share with the Jewish people, they share with us, it's just so wonderful to have an exchange, a spiritual exchange, a cultural exchange. Ateret, we love her. She is in Israel. We laugh because she knows everyone in Jerusalem. And
Yeah.
she is the head of, the one of the main people, founders.
She's the queen of the Shuk.
Yeah, she
exactly,
is.
of Indigenous Bridges. And I can tell you that, I can be so sick and so worn out. And when we all get together and we get with Ateret, we add that piece, it's like God kisses. It's like being kissed from heaven.
It is.
Together and partner together. I have never experienced anything like when First Nations and the Jewish people come together. And there's just such a stirring in the spirit, and such a deep love that we have for each other.
That's
And
exactly
so,
what I was when I was thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, Quamanique is speaking exactly what's going through my mind. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of your experiences? What do you think is happening? Why is there such a deep open door connection between our people as Indigenous people and the people of Israel? I mean, I know that we have a very recent shared trauma, and there is a trauma bonding that takes place when we've ministered to Holocaust survivors, for example. And when I say ministered to, I mean serve. Like we were helping serve in food kitchens and not proselytizing,
And just
just serving
singing
and
to
singing
them.
songs to them and just blessing them and hearing their stories. And the moment they knew that we were First Nations, they would open up with trauma stories where the people that are living there among them for 10, 15, 20 years are going, they've never shared this with anybody. We've never heard this before.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
would
I
you
think
share-
the post-historical trauma that we've all been through is one thing, but I do think that the Hebraic mindset is very much like the native mindset. It's circular.
tribal.
It's not, it's not linear. And the Roman Greek thinking and the Western world is very much more linear thinking. So I think that when we come together and we're circular type of people, we don't have to go across so many bridges with each other. We kind of on the same wavelength.
Mhm. And one of the things that I remember so I love the story about how you guys went to Israel and the Knesset
Oh,
the
was it
doors
Avram?
of the Knesset
Will
just
you tell
blew
that
wide
story?
open.
The
I
Avram
will
Burns
tell. I
story?
will tell that story. I was not on that trip. My husband, Dr. Suuqiina, was on that trip,
Okay.
and
And it was
he,
before you were married.
that was before we were married. I was supposed to be on that trip, and my granddaughter drowned. She was 2, and so I had to stay back, and my son went in my stead. So I didn't get to be on that trip. But Suuqiina was on that trip, and he actually bought 2 headdresses to take, antique headdresses that he had found to take to present to uh, the leadership of the Knesset. Grand Chief Linda Prince put that trip together. In fact, she was the first Native person that lit the candle at the Feast of Tabernacles for First Nations.
Wow.
Grand Chief Linda Prince has done incredible things to open gates. She also went before the Queen. And she is one of our forerunners. Suuqiina was with her. And I honor her, and I honor Chief Will Mayo and Deputy Chief Kenny Blacksmith, and they were all on that trip together, many of them. And even now, after that trip, some years after, Chief Ann Richardson from Virginia went to Israel and actually laid her headdress at the feet of the leadership. So many different people across First Nations have been doing so much work for a lot of years. But on that trip, this was in 1999. And the reason that they went to the Knesset is because a precursor to that was they met in Nashville with some of the Jewish people. I put that meeting together where Grand Chief Linda Prince met with the Israeli people to open that gates in order to be able to go, because the First Nations people do believe in protocol. So they believe in being invited, and they also do protocol when they come. So there was no way they were not going to go before the government or try to do the protocol, the honor, to be welcome on the land. That's just, they presented themselves. And Avram Berg was there. He was presiding over state. And when they went in and they shared, they were only supposed to have about 5 or 10 minutes. And so they all filed in and they had their gifts and they were presenting their gifts. And in fact, in Avram Berg asked, how did you come to faith? He asked them to give their faith testimony. And I think it was Grand Chief Will Mayo who said,
That's crazy that he asked them that. That's like an invitation, right?
And
Wow.
so Grand Chief Will Mayo basically gave that story. And then and he actually cleared time. He was so interested because Grand Chief Linda Prince stood before and repented for the St. Louis. She said, it was our land, but our land had been taken from us, and we want to repent for what happened to the people that were turned away.
Yeah, because and I don't know if many people know this, the lights of that ship could be seen from the shore, according to historical documents, and everybody that was on that ship that got turned away perished in the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. So she basically repented for that and said, we want to stand with your people. We are here because, and let me do a little side note that after that time, even when there's been war in Israel, like Elizabeth Hawker, Grand Chief Linda Prince, different ones have gone during war. And people have said, why are you going? There's a war. They're like, we're the warriors. We're standing with Israel. And so anyway, he had cleared more time for them. And so they said, we'd like to do an honor song on the drum, on the grandfather drum, the Abba drum. And they started singing the First Nations songs. The Jewish people were like, those are our songs. And our people were like, no, they're our songs. And so some of the same Hebraic words were in our songs. And so we're going to get ready to sing the Yahweh song, but they didn't want to be disrespectful because in Israel they say Hashem, because they say the word is so holy to them and they know it's so powerful. They don't want the word to go out so that other people can use it in malicious ways. And so I think it was Richard Nunez who was leading the drum, and he said, we have an honor song, but it uses the name and we don't want to be disrespectful or be dishonorable in any way. And Offenberg said, no, go right ahead. You're the Indians. Do what you came here to do.
Mm-hmm. Which people is Richard Nunez from?
He's Apache.
Cool.
And so they started the drum song and they started singing Yahweh, Yahweh on the drum. And so Offenberg put on the headdress, came down on the drum, and they took pictures of it and they put it in the newspaper, the Jerusalem newspapers, and said, the Indians are here. But he started drumming and singing the Yahweh song.
Whoa!
So after that was over and they ushered everyone out, when they were going out, the media, they were weeping. Right before that, he raised his hands and he pronounced a blessing in Hebrew. And so everyone was weeping. All the Jewish people, when they got out, they asked them, they thought that they were getting the Aaronic blessing. And they said, was that the Aaronic blessing? And they said, no. And they said, why are you weeping? They said, because the head of state said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Baruch haba b'shem Adonai.
And they said, and when the head of Israel pronounces that over the Goyim, our Messiah is at the gate.
That is such
Let's just pause right
epic
there.
moment in the history of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that First Nations people were at that moment is so touching. I mean, think about that the Jewish people wept and said, this is the moment we've been waiting for. It means Mashiach is at the doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And that catalyst
was the drum and the indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is
that's the powerful, when our people get together. I mean, you guys, we were together when Atred and I put that gathering together in Nashville, Tennessee, to welcome the Jewish people. And we went over and ate with the rabbi and his wife and the family there in Nashville.
Yes, the Chabad.
And we had such a wonderful time. We sang our songs. They sang their songs. It was so powerful. And at the end, the same thing happened. You said, Joseph, we'd like to sing. They said, sing them one more song. And you said the same thing. And he said, no, you sing your songs. You're able to sing your songs. And we sang the song with the name in it. And at the end, we looked over and the rabbi's just grinning and so excited. And he said, I have to tell you, it makes me jealous.
yes. He said, I
He said-
wish I could sing songs with the names in it
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
And when you were telling the
that is-
story, I thought of the same exact time with that rabbi together. I thought the same thing.
It's that way every time. When Suuqiina and I and Elizabeth Hawker went with Atcheret into LA, we're Beverly Hills at the synagogue, and we welcomed. Suuqiina is writing the rabbi. Rabbi has written a beautiful book, and Suuqiina and the rabbi are writing back and forth. Suuqiina
Nice.
sends him paintings, and he sends Suuqiina things, and they're friends. I mean, that's the purpose of ceremony. The ceremony is not for us to stop at ceremony. That would be like getting married at the altar and then just leaving the altar. We've had so many reconciliation meetings between the church and First Nations, to the point that Richard Twist, rest in peace, another one of our leaders, said, I'm going to have to start getting pedicures if they keep washing my feet.
That's funny if you knew what this big Lakota man looked like.
I know. But the truth of the matter is, the reconciliation meetings, some of our leaders quit doing them because the purpose of reconciliation, the ministry of reconciliation, isn't to just have ceremony. It's to have relationship at the end of ceremony. You
Yeah.
just get married and you leave, then you're not really married.
Yes.
So, that's, and we had that, COVID hit. When we met with the IAC, and you guys were there, and then COVID hit, we were supposed to be doing functions, and now they have a whole new set of people, so we're going to have to go back and do that again with them. But the purpose of doing this is to build relationship and to have a relationship, with each other.
And that is something that I'm learning, I should say. I've started on the trek of learning from you. That's one of the biggest things that I feel I'm learning from you. And that is how to prioritize people over actions and to-do lists, and how to really do and walk out the second great command from Yeshua, which is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you teach us by example, and you give us words of wisdom. And that, by the way, I'm going to put a shameless plug in. I'm so excited for your new podcast.
Yes, we listened to it. Oh
The
my
first
gosh, it was
episode.
so good.
It's called, you guys, it's called The Be Attitudes with Dr. Quamanique Suuqiina. Simple attitudes of wisdom for spiritual transformation. I'm really excited about it. I love it. I'm so thankful to you.
You're gonna get hooked.
For
I'm telling you,
chronicling
you're gonna
your
get addicted.
wisdom.
Yes, it's just wonderful. It's having the wisdom of the elders, of grandma's voice speaking to you, and it really makes you feel like family, and it was powerful. Authenticity was the key thing that kept popping out at me, and then by the end I was like, I can't wait till the second one.
You guys, if you like
The
me,
second one is actually be authentic.
you guys, if you miss your grandma like me, you're gonna love this podcast.
Yeah.
If you wish that you got to talk to your grandma all the time and hear her words of wisdom, you're gonna love this podcast. It's just, I love Quaminic. I love your joy that you carry with you in constant, abundant supply. You have such an amazing sense of humor, and the way that you put words so that you help us become more emotionally intelligent. I mean, that's another thing you've helped me with so much, is that I was born an emotional, let's just say that's not my aptitude.
Emotionless.
There you go. And you're helping me in that regard to be able to identify with people. Will you talk about that?
Well, I can tell you that most people actually are not born emotionless. They are born with emotion, and they learn to push that down based on hard knocks, the school of hard knocks. So in society, you have to learn how to have those emotions and steward them, or you're destroyed. So emotional intelligence is very important. In fact, I love learning. I continue to learn. And during COVID, I went to a school called Prior, and it has all kinds of management trainings on it that you can do online. I went to some in person too. But it teaches managers one of the predominant things that you have to be a good manager is to have emotional intelligence if you're working with people. And so it's just really important, but it can be learned. I mean, it's there, it's inside, and we can call it forth. And the way I talk about emotions are not supposed to control us. They're supposed to be like our children. When our children come to us and they present something to us, we want to listen to our children. Don't want to say, "Oh, go away, go over to the corner. I don't want to hear from you. You're a child." We need to hear our children, but then we need to make the decision and choice about what to do with that, because we're the adult. So our emotions are there to help us to have information and help us live in the world and prosper and connect with other people. They're not to control us. So it's about stewarding them, but we do need to have them on board. They're there. And what will happen is they'll get trapped in the body and they'll start coming out sideways on people and on ourselves.
Pitching temper tantrums like little toddlers is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, the body speaks. The body starts talking. You have to start having, medical issues, because they're going to come out. The gut, your belly, is the seat of the emotions, and that's why a lot of people have gut issues. When you have emotional things going on, it will many times affect your gut, and also grief can sometimes get trapped in the chest, and you'll have problems breathing. And so it's about learning. I'm still learning myself. I'm almost 71, and I'm still, I was talking, I always have a therapist person that I can talk to, because I was a therapist. I still do that with people. And it's kind of like a dentist would never think of not having their teeth checked twice a year. And so there's times when I'm going through difficult times that I will check in with the person outside of me, that's not a friend, not that it's a totally objective, that I can run across things. So just the other day, I recently lost, my brother passed. He had diabetes for many years. He was 59, and I'm going along handling things, and we're dismantling my mom's house because he lived there after she passed, and I said to my counselor, I said, I just don't like it, that when I'm going through this stuff, it affects my body. And she just started laughing. She said, "Quaminique, you're a therapist. What do you mean you don't like it? It affects your body. You know it affects your body." Well, I know it cognitively, but these things, that's why it's good to have someone on the outside sometimes. It just basically, it's the scriptures where it says, when you're walking together, when one falls down, the other can lift up. It's just wisdom, and there's wisdom in a multitude of many counselors. So it's helpful to have that, because even myself, and I've worked in this for 40 years, I still want to deny my emotions,
And you're right, the body does speak, but we don't want it to cuss at us.
This is what's so wonderful about what you bring, and the teaching, the good medicine that you bring. For those, if you didn't catch it, the podcast is on charismamag.com, and you can look up the Beatitudes, and we'll also post the link in the description below. And what's wonderful about this too, it's the voice of our elders, and it's specifically also the voice of the women in the body. And this is something that as First Nations people, we're a matriarchal people. We're known by who our mother is. Our clan is passed down through the mother's clan. And there's been exceptions that have been made since colonization and the conquistadors and everything, to reflect mixed bloods clans. But for the most part, the tradition is still kept that the clan is passed down through the mother. And so to us as Native people, we're used to strong women. We're used to warrior women. We're used to women in leadership, in positions as council members and even chiefs. And this is something that is, for the most part, I think, and this may be a very ethnocentric point of view for me, because I was raised having the appreciation for the sacred life givers, for the women in that respect. I think a lot of that is lost in our modern society. So when we hear the voice of the women, we listen as Native people. But this is a very difficult bridge to build or much less cross when it comes to the body, to the quote unquote church. And I know this is something that you have struggled with and have faced many challenges, as do many women today in this walk. I believe that it now is more than ever the time that that's something that we as Native people can bring to the body, is to learn to listen to the voice of the women. What do you have to say about that? I am all I want to hear.
I think it, I do agree that that is a challenge in the church. I think, I'm writing a book called Buried Alive, the dishonor and disrespect of women in the religious system. And as I'm doing the historical study for all this has been going on. It's inside and outside of religious institutions. I think the part that's difficult, that makes it so, what I would use the word heinous, is when you use God to dishonor anyone, then it's the worst form of abuse you can do, because it separates people from the source. It takes God's name in vain, which is different than cussing. It's bringing God's name to nothing, to naught. That's the worst thing you can do. And so when you use God to be subversive to a culture or a people, then it really is one of the worst forms. And that's what has happened in the church for women. Women do not need a second. I keep hearing all the time women are going to be released this year. And I laugh because the Lord spoke to me one day when I said, I was so excited. Oh God, I'm so excited. Women are going to be released. And he said, where are they holding them?
In the dungeon. That's where.
And I got this picture.
Frida!
I know, I got this picture of this pen that all these women were in. And the Lord gave me this vignette that I used, because a lot of times in my teaching, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Because I'm also an expressive arts therapist, I will use vignettes and certain things where the people come up and act them out, because it really, it gets you out of your left brain into your right mind.
It's the storyteller in you.
Yeah.
Native storyteller.
And the Lord gave me this picture, and I used this in one of my presentations. I went before the conference, and I took duct tape, natives and duct tape.
Yeah. Fixes everything.
I took duct tape and I made a big, huge square up at the very front where I was going to be speaking. But I left a space open in the very front, across the front, probably around maybe 4 feet. But in the back, I left a little, like the size of that you could walk through, a door. And so I put all these chairs across the front, and I made that the gate. And so when I was getting ready to speak, I said, how many of you women have heard that women are going to be released this year? How many people? And everybody was raising their hand. And I said, are you excited about that? Yes. I said, do you want to be released? Come on up here if you want to be released. So they all got up and got in that square. And then I called the men up where all the chairs were. I said, this is the gate. And since we're in a male valued system, I really need you men to decide who's going to be released, because that's really kind of what's happening. And so the guys were reluctant, but they came up, and I had a microphone. So I was interviewing people as I was doing it. And the guys were all up at the gate. So I said, now you need to decide which woman. And the women were jumping up and down. Pick me, and so I would interview the women. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm so excited. I've been in this pen for so long. I can't wait to get out. I just want to be released. And then I go to the men and they say, we're trying to figure out which ones to let out. This is a big responsibility. We don't know who to let. And so finally they picked one and she got out. So I interviewed her and she was like, oh, I'm so excited. So I went back to the women. How do you feel about her? And they were like, well, why is she so special? What's wrong? Why did she get picked? Why aren't we being picked? So then the guys really got into it. So they started releasing women, and then they sent one back. I don't even remember why.
Is that in the rule?
Sent one back.
They sent one back, which really happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, and
Yeah,
so anyway, they were so caught up in it, and I just slipped back to the back, with all their attention was toward the front. And I slipped back there where that little space was. And on the microphone, I said in a really loud voice, I said, behold, I am the gate. No
Ooh.
one comes to the Father except by me. And all the women turned around. And I said, this is a man-made gate. This is the religious system that we as women have been a part of. We did not need a second touch after Calvary. We were all set free, male and female.
That's right.
And I said, now, all you had to do was come through this gate. There's nothing here. He is the gate. But let me warn you before you do it. You will miss out on some things. You will be you will be ostracized. You will be called a Jezebel. You will be. I started naming all the stuff. You might miss some things. You might not have people come to help move you, because I said this system is a system, and there are beautiful people in it. They're believers in it. We're in it, but we are not supposed to be of it. It is a system of the world, just like all the others. And we're supposed to be able to move in and out of them, but we are not hirelings. We are not behooving to this system and beholden to it. We're kingdom people. So if you want to be free, all you do is walk through here, but understand you will be working out your own salvation in fear and trembling. You will no longer be looking to this to tell you. And so, that's what I would say about women. It is challenging. It's challenging. You all know that. Suuqiina and I, we would get up to teach together, and it would be horrific, because before we could even speak on the message, we had to speak on misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
And that is rampant.
And
Rampant. It's actually rampant everywhere. This isn't just a church problem, quote unquote.
Absolutely.
You find it in the secular world. You find it in the corporate world. You find it everywhere.
I'll tell you, I see, that I've walked out this with you. We've had many a discussion about this, and I've seen being in the battle against the enemy, and I'm saying, wow, why does my back hurt so badly? Oh, what is this blood? I'm not running from the fight. Why do I have all of these arrows in my back?
Mm-hmm.
And you realize they're coming from friendly fire.
That's good right there.
And that has been something that I've been really thankful to have you help navigate me through some of these processes, because it's good to hear, yes, you did things the right way, or here is another way you can go about doing these things so that you're paying as much honor as you can in the system, and just being a good checks and balances for me to make sure that the things that are occurring are not due to some fault of mine, because that's where we tend to go, isn't it?
It is. And the main thing too is that this is a paradigm of thought. The misogyny and all that, the people, predominantly, most of them aren't bad. There's nothing worse than a woman misogynist, of which I have been one. I mean, when it's the way we think. And there was a time in my life that I wouldn't have a woman doctor years ago. It had to be a man that would say it. And so it's not like that I'm, pointing fingers. It affects us all, because it is a paradigm of thought. And it's difficult to change a paradigm.
It is.
Really, honestly, the only person that can do that is Yeshua himself. He has to hermanoia and put his hand on our head, like when he was walking with his own people, his disciples on the Emmaus Road. They didn't recognize him. He had to change their whole paradigm. And so paradigm shifting, really, it has to be God. Even if we're up speaking and teaching on something, we cannot shift a paradigm. God has to get on top in our words and bring life to them for people to be able to change paradigms.
And that is critical, because we are living in a world system. We are living in the world, but we're supposed to be kingdom minded. And so when we talk about paradigm shifts, that's what we're working on the whole time, the renewal of our mind.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Tell us about, I know you mentioned your book, Buried Alive, which I'm really looking forward to one day, but what other kind of resources can you share? I'm at toward the end of y'all's latest book and I'm enjoying it. And then I took it somewhere to read it, and now I'm tortured by the fact that I haven't been able to read the last few words. I've been looking all over for it. It'll turn up wherever
Well,
I've been.
you can find any of our resources on our website, which is indigenousmessengers.com. You can also go on there, and we have in pictures our lives. There's 3 sections on Suuqiina and you can tell that I'm relational, 3 sections on me. And that way people can kind of get to know and see our history. But that's predominantly where you see all the resources. I have written a children's book called You Can't Hug a Porcupine, that Susan Nichols, my dear sister and friend, illustrated beautifully. And that's about that we are called to love everyone. That doesn't mean trust everyone. That we have to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And in the church that I love, I've been taught how to be as gentle as a dove. I was not always taught how to be as wise as a serpent. I was always giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, instead of understanding that the doubt was my discernment, and that I wasn't to judge people, judge fruit, but I did need to be discerning. And so that book is for children, to teach them about that. That God made
That's such a good word right there, about discerning versus judging, because there are times when the Lord tells us to judge, and there are times when he says not to judge, and those words are the same in our language. But when you look at the way you just described it, it can help reconcile the difference between those two.
And I think
that judging people is when you look at them and you're like, oh, I would never do that. I can't believe they did that. That's judging. But when you look at something and you judge it from the perspective of this is what's happening, this is a fact, that's a different kind of judgment.
Right. I think that's the difference between judging that comes from the flesh, which James says is judging Creator's instructions, judging the Torah, if we judge one another. But there is a righteous judgment that we're supposed to do. And the only way that we can learn to do that is by knowing what is righteous to the Creator, what is his way of judging righteously. And it won't be based off of any emotion or gossip or backbiting or anything like that that's destructive, because he's a righteous judge. One of the things we wanted to ask you too is, as an elder, as a leader for decades, both internationally and nationally, you've worked with many different people. You stood before kings, queens, politicians, heads of states, to the people who are boots on the ground, to the persecuted, and everybody. All those people, I'm sure those experiences have led you to a place of understanding, and this is leading into what it is that you do now.
Not to mention your education.
Yeah, plus your education is realizing how much people need inner work, especially those in leadership. In their households, in ministry, in a corporate office,
even as married people.
As married people, tell us why that is so crucial and also critical at this time now.
So I'll give you just a quick little background on me. I'm what they would call an adult child of an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic, and so I lived in that as a child. And what can happen for many people in ministry, especially pastors and leaders, many times they were in situations where in their family, they were what we would call the hero child in the dysfunctional family. The one who held it all together was the one who wanted to fix things and wanted to help things. Many people who had parents who were sick became doctors. So your helping professions are many times full of people who came out of homes that were dysfunctional. And so we learn coping mechanisms during that time. And those coping mechanisms are given to us from God. They're how we survive. They're not a bad thing. What happens is, as we age, if we don't do that inner work and understand those coping mechanisms become things that are natural, and we have to do them more and more and more and more. And coping mechanisms would be like denial and projection and minimization, like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But those coping mechanisms become blocks to our growth and to our ability sometimes to have integrity, because those coping mechanisms, if we pick up substances and we pick up processes, activities to help us with to feel comfortable. People that have come in those situations, they want to be comfortable. If you're looking at addiction, predominantly it's just people started it because they were trying to get comfortable. We call that medicate to regulate. We're trying to regulate the stuff in the brain. We're trying not to be sad. We're trying to be safe. We're trying not to be scared. We're trying not to be overly angry. But over time, those things don't work anymore. And at some point, God comes to us and asks us for that. I use this analogy. It's like we've been in a ship and it blew up and we're floating on one of the pieces of it. And then all of a sudden, God comes up and we're in the ocean. He says, hand me your piece. We're calling for God to come. And he goes, give me your plank. It's like, you kidding me? So when God started working with me on that, and my freedom, and I'm still working on that. It's a process. I mean, life is a process. He basically said, you're going to have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was challenging, you know. What we have oftentimes is that we have leaders that haven't done that work. They've been medicating, and many times it's their work. It's their ministry becomes that way of being able to cope. But their family members at home don't get the same person that's in the pulpit. And so what happens then, you have another generation of people who are being parented by someone who cannot be present. They're not available. And so when I was a therapist, I had as many children of pastors and ministries families as I did alcoholic adults, kids who've been raised in alcoholic families.
Wow.
It was more difficult for me to reach the pastors and ministries' children because they had aught against God. They had heard God preached, they had seen God from the pulpit, and then they had to come home and live with something else. And it made them, it was a double standard, a double life. And so it actually caused them to have problems with God. And so what I see now is a plague in the church as a whole. Now, part of that might be because I work in that, and if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. I have a lot of people calling me to ask me, for guidance. However, we have seen all kinds of major leaders take a dive in the last few years, and I'm not going to name names. People listening can know that. Major leaders, evangelicals, charismatics, Catholics across the board, denominations that are being held responsible for things that have been covered up. The people weren't bad. The majority of people, there are a few people that you have to really be careful of. Narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths. They're difficult.
Yes, they are.
Most people are really broken and just trying, and I say beautifully broken. We're all beautifully broken. It's not something we're supposed to be ashamed of. We're human. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So the first thing is not to go into it thinking we're supposed to know everything. And we're getting through the world is hard. It's hard to survive childhood, any kind, because parents aren't perfect. We weren't supposed to have perfect parents. And most people, if you've had parents that had you when they were in their 20s and 30s, they weren't very wise. You don't usually get wisdom until later years. So God set it up so that we didn't have perfect parents, so we would have a hole that only he could fill. So there's no shame in not being a perfect parent or surviving your childhood without stuff. What's difficult is the leaders that I see that are being destroyed. And it makes me sad for the leaders and the families, because they could do, their church will come to them, or their family do an intervention with them, and they'll just go and start another church, or they'll divorce their wife or husband and start with a new person.
That's something that we have been very shocked at lately. It seems all of a sudden, but we're just people that we've known, and people, extended people in this movement, in this walk, and getting divorces left and right. When everything seemed, incredible, and they were faithful followers, and
when they're on the right
discipleship,
track and looking at what looks like a good relationship with the Lord. But what you're talking about with the inner work has been, for me, one of my prayers that ended up leading me into my inner work, um, intentionally working on the inner self, has been my prayer for humility. And I believe that that was a prayer that was placed in me by the Father because I saw how much he respected and loved Moses for his humility and David for his humility. And I wanted that humility because the way it felt to me was that humility was a perfume, and it was Yeshua's favorite perfume. That this was the smell of the bride, was humility. And so I wanted that fragrance around me. And so I started praying for humility, and it ended up leading me into what you're describing as my inner work. And what I love about listening to you in helping guide me through this process has been that you are such a gentle guide, and that's like the Holy Spirit. You're very Holy Spirit led. The Holy Spirit gently brings these things up and says, look at this. And so even though it hasn't been overt, it's been a very easy process in many ways. It's beautiful because we're submitting it to the Lord to work on, and he's renewing our minds to the mind of Messiah. And to me, what your podcast is doing is that gentle way of helping us self-reflect in a way that is sober judgment about ourselves, and allowing the Father to work on what we need to work on, what he's desiring to work on for us, and learning that addiction doesn't necessarily mean whatever the gossip column wants to write about you. It might mean that sometimes you're addicted to anger or addicted to working hard. And whatever kind of addiction it is, like you're saying, those coping mechanisms are designed to be temporary.
Mhm.
But it's habitual by human nature for us to continue keeping those around, like old friends that are helping us through something, when really their usefulness is only as an ER nurse.
Absolutely. That's really good, Laura Lynn. That's good. I love what you said about humility. I thought that is beautiful. You paint pictures with your words.
Oh,
well,
thank you.
well, we need to continue hearing more wisdom and more of these teachings, and as an elder, as a leader, um, in this movement, in this walk, being a trailblazer for so many things, including the Hebraic understanding of the faith, and the bridge building of First Nations, and walking through really the fires of being some of the first to say, yeah, I'm Indigenous and I'm also a believer, and I can be both. What is something that you would want to impart onto the next generation?
I think one of the things that, I'm collecting stories from First Nations people who are mixed, who are blended, because I think it's been very hard for those of us who were not raised on a reservation per se, or in Alaska, it's villages. My husband was raised in a village, so he's very much accepted, even though he was separated from his at 7, he was adopted by the missionaries. There's the people who've lived on reservations and been with their people. They feel the right to be there. I think it's very challenging for those of us who are trying to come back home, who are wanting to honor our culture, because our grandparents were those people. They prayed for 7 generations ahead. They didn't just pray for blood quantums. And
That's
I think
good.
I think that, when I look at my grandchild and my grandchildren, I would not pray up 4 generations and stop and say, I'm sorry, those that one married this and they're no longer my grandchild. Um, I understand that the government has caused blood quantum and has caused the scarcity principle. I'm hoping what the book of the stories I'm wanting to write a chapter in there to the full bloods, or the ones that live native, that no one is trying to replace them. We're just trying to honor. And so I think being a part of that movement, that in the last 20, 30 years, of people who are wanting to come back and honor their culture, whatever that culture is. My son went to Ireland over and over. He's Cherokee and Irish. He identifies with Ireland, but the Irish people aren't beating him up for that. They think that's wonderful. And so I'm my prayer. It's been difficult to be in that position, to be called a pretendian or a wannabe, or I understand there are those kind of people. The majority of people who are, because of DNA, because of culture being more open now, people are wanting to go back to that. They're wanting to find those pieces. It's just like looking in a it's just like doing your DNA and just wanting to know your roots, who you are. I think that's been the hardest thing, to be a part of this part of the movement and see my people, my friends, and people that I love who are First Nations and are wanting to step up and honor, be treated poorly. That's been very hard to see.
Well, we can be our own worst enemy as Native people.
Yeah, and I get that, but I'm just saying that so many of our people who are now, after these years, walking through, I want to, what I want to do is be a bridge builder. And so if that means building a bridge between Israel and First Nations, between the church and Israel, between the church and First Nations, or between First Nations and First Nations, that's my prayer and desire, is to see us be able to partner with First Nations, those of us who are not blood quantum and those who are. My marriage is one of those. My husband is blood quantum and I'm not, and he does not treat me poorly because of that. And we were in a meeting one time, and this lady, yelled when we were being introduced, how much Native is she? And my husband said, enough.
That's such a beautiful response.
I'm enough Native to be able to love my people and teach it to my granddaughter and relearn things. I'm an old girl here, but it's not ever you can teach this old dog new tricks. I want to learn to honor. And if that means honoring parts of me, and if it's just parts, that's fine. But I want to be able to stand and honor that. And I do honor the people that are reservation people, and the people I will never, I was not persecuted that way. My husband was in an orphanage residential school. I never pretend to ever have suffered to that degree. However, at the same time, if I'm in a position to be able to speak for myself, and I'm an ancestor of that, I'm going to speak for the First Nations people, not as a representative, but I'm going to be speaking to the church, to whoever, that they need to honor the First Nations people. I'm learning it so that I can, I'm a mixed blood, so I have Euro in me as well. And I want my Euro part to be able to take responsibility for things and step up and do what's right for First Nations. So
thank you for that.
Beautiful.
I believe that First Nations is part of Creator's end time strategy. And so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And this has been wonderful. That we will pray that it not be the only one, that maybe down the road we'll do another follow-up one. And in between then, let's continue doing the work that we're doing. Ataret just keeps saying, when are y'all coming back to Israel? When you coming back to Israel?
By the way, we've mentioned Ataret's name, and people are probably like,
who is this
enigmatic
You have to know her. You have to know her.
Yes.
Ataret Shemuel. She is the coordinator and founder of Indigenous Bridges, and she's out of Jerusalem, the state of Israel. And
she's an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah, yes. She's Orthodox Jewish woman who is she's passionate, she's faithful,
she has a heart for
she loves Indigenous people, and has done wonderful things, like during COVID, helped to bring much needed supplies to the Navajo Nation. when supplies weren't getting there from our own government. Here's this Orthodox Jewish woman who just a firebrand got things done and really helped our people. And that's just one of many projects that she's done. And then we met her and we've all done some projects with her. And yes,
I'll tell you what, when you get us together with Quamanique and Ateret, it's like fireworks go off.
Yes.
Yes, and we do have a gathering coming up in July in Richmond.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about that. Yes.
That's in 2023. And I don't have, we're just now getting the place, but it's in, and they can find out about that on my Facebook, Quamanique Suuqiina.
Yes, keep us in touch, and we will also keep our listeners and our social media about this gathering, this First Nations gathering being hosted by Dr. Quamanique Suuqiina in Virginia, isn't it?
It's in Richmond, Virginia, and we're going to be doing protocol there with the First Nations people. We're going to be working with Israel, and then we're going to have a gathering and invite the church to come, our church family to come and be a part of that with us. And we'll have all native speakers and all native worship team.
Oh, wow. This is going to be incredible. This is going to cause a stirring. So this is an open invitation to everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
They'll need to kind of reserve, because we're going to have,
of course.
let somebody know. Just let one of us know that you're wanting to come.
You'll probably have a Facebook invitation.
I will.
Right?
It will be on Facebook. I'm going to start as soon as I get the place. We're working on the place right now. Then we're gonna put it out on Facebook. So
okay, wonderful.
My Facebook is Quaminique Robin Suuqiina.
Yes,
right.
And for the spelling, you can look at the podcast name, or you
Is
can
it-
try to guess how to spell it yourself, and you won't ever guess it.
Yes, and if you show up to the gathering without having registered, it's okay, because we always have need for sacrifices.
And kitchen help.
What are them engines doing over there in West Virginia?
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You guys
Dr.
so much. I'm
Kwaminique.
so proud of everything that you're doing, and I just love you so much.
And we love you so big.
Love you too.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. And please make sure to check out Dr. Quamanique's and Dr. Suuqiina's ministry, Indigenous Messengers International. They do accept your generous or widow's mite donations. And it's a beautiful way to be a blessing to First Nations elders. So thank you for those with a generous heart who want to bless them.
Amen to that. Hahan katu. Many blessings to you, to our listeners, and we just pray Creator's abundance, peace upon you all. Yaya kakona toreto guari.
Seneko kakona, dohi gesesti, peace to you all.
If you were blessed by the RiverWinds and would like to be a blessing in return, they welcome any donations to be given to their 501c3 nonprofit organization, Firekeepers International. This podcast is made possible by kind and generous listeners. And woohoo, tax deductible. That's what I'm talking about. You can learn more about this organization at www.firekeepersinternational.org and more about the RiverWinds at www.theriverwinds.com. If you enjoy Council Fire with the RiverWinds, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, then we thank you to keep your salty attitude to yourself, because gossip is an ugly sin. For everyone else, we hope to connect with you again next time on Council Fire with the RiverWinds.